me.
Budget cuts.
And we should be live. There we are. We are on TV. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Litchfield Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2013. Let's please begin the meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you, everyone, for making it in here today. The federal government may be closed, but we are not. We're here because we care.
Good.
Yeah. The camera didn't have a close-up shot, so it's not as bad as it sounded. First item on the agenda this evening is public input. Are there any members of the public who would like to address the board? No? Okay. Hearing none, I'll close public input. And now on to work for the community planning grant. First item under that is the revised draft agricultural preservation overlay district. Hey, Kevin. We just started.
Good.
You haven't missed a thing.
I just got your email saying you'd be a few minutes late.
One of those days.
Take it we're all reading through the proposed district. Any comments, any questions, any concerns?
Are we talking about doing all of 3A or just the area where farms are now?
That hasn't been decided yet.
All right, I couldn't remember if we discussed that or not.
No,
I know someone mentioned it, I think in one of the listening sessions about having all of 3A like that, but you can't really, if it's commercial already, you can't really take that away.
do you actually, I may have one more copy of it. Do you need another hard copy?
I'd just like to provide one to our audience,
Oh,
our observers.
I gave Joan and Donna my spare hard copies.
We're up here with our faces into our laptops reading this document, and you folks
Is that
have no
okay?
idea
Do
what
you
we're
have
looking at.
I may have one more copy from the last
We
meeting,
do.
at least for the agriculture. Not that one.
So you comment that we're gonna look at the
I don't have an extra of the other, of the commercial.
areas after completing the future land use map. So is that just premature then? In terms
So,
of,
sorry, I was,
oh, you had commented on the right side on page 2 about review sample areas after completion of the future land use map.
yeah, so.
Is that a better order to do it?
Yeah, so the main thing is we're still trying to get more public input on the survey. Just to give you some kind of votes on the different future land use map alternatives that were created as part of the Strawberry Festival booth and the future land use mapping workshop. And just trying to like scope out meetings to get from now to town meeting. Hoping next meeting, we can spend the bulk of the time looking at the future land use map, coming up with a selected alternative and draft, and then start looking at how that might impact boundaries for zoning districts. But it would be best to start with the future land use map, because that comes directly out of that public outreach process.
Okay.
And use that to guide where you draw your boundaries.
And you're using all the survey results from last spring or whatever we did that.
Yeah, so you've got survey results from a year ago,
Yep.
which had some general guidance on future land use preferences. Then you've got the 4 map alternatives that came out of the outreach session,
Yep.
and Strawberry Festival. Then you have those you've got the 4 most recent ones, because they're the more specific ones. Those are out in the current survey. So then you've got multiple different sets of future land use input to weigh and kind of smooth out and finalize.
We're finally getting a good cross-section of community input to help us understand what's the best fit.
Yeah.
So it's the second survey? You mentioned there's another survey that was sent out, or is that just to the people?
Yeah, there is another survey that's out there that we're still trying to get some more input on. We did put that on the agenda tonight just to get the word around. I know, Tom, you want to kind of share how you've,
Right now, it's out to 350 some odd units of senior housing.
Okay.
It will be this week.
the-
I know we have some replies back already from my development. I don't know if Gene sent it over to you people yet or not. Gene White. You haven't seen it yet, then?
No.
She should be sending it over this week.
okay.
She was on vacation, so.
And Russ, Joan, and I worked on a backpack stuffer that Joan has cleared with the school department to send home so that we can get that link out more. So,
Can you send anything out? I don't know if it's legal or not with tax bills. Can you put a stuffer in there?
It would be too late, I think.
Yeah.
Is it too late?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
Well, it's
well,
December,
We're going to that, yeah, the bills go out in November, but I started handing them out to the schools.
okay,
great, thank you.
so. The survey that's out there right now is not as involved.
Yeah.
In terms of public input, it's just trying to get some general direction for what voters might be willing to go for.
Ones I've talked to so far seem to like the format of it.
Okay.
It's easy to understand and,
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We tried to keep it short.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah, boundaries are all kind of flagged for another day.
is it on the website too?
It is. The trick is though, it's on the project website, which you have to go to the planning board's website to get the link to the project website. And then you can find the link to the survey.
Can
So
we put it on the
it's-
front page or?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're working that
okay.
way. Jason did email us back asking for
Yes.
some specifics. You saw that?
Yeah, he wanted to know specific language for a Facebook or Twitter post or news post, and all three are kind of different because different character links.
Mm-hmm.
Just a heads up on the ag piece, there's, anything that's new from the last time you saw the draft is yellow. Decisions that still need to be made are, in word bubbles. There's a couple areas where there's some alternative options provided for how to approach it. For example, the definition of agriculture. We have two sample different definitions here. This was in response to the direction from the board being a definition that said something to the fact of anything that's legal and consumable, trying to come up with something
All-encompassing.
all-encompassing, simple. So you get two different options there for you. Or you can come up with a hybrid.
I think the objectives are fine. You put a bubble about, are they too wordy or should they be condensed? But I think they cover all the main areas. Can we keep all of them as pertinent?
Sorry, where were you?
Oh, the page 1,
Okay.
objectives, you have the little bubble.
Oh, okay.
Then for to decide which goals are most pertinent. And they all kind of overlap a little bit, but they all basically encompass what we should be doing anyway.
Yep. You can have all of them, none of them, some of them.
I think it covers everything.
Yeah.
In that case, I think not necessarily the more the better. You don't want it too wordy or too much, but I think you want to make sure people understand why it's done. Because that's been the big question, is why are we doing this
Okay,
from a lot of people.
okay.
So, to me, an objective clarifies the reason why you're doing something.
Okay. Okay. Moving down the page. If everyone agrees there.
Yeah, I think the objectives, I think you have them all there. I think
Okay.
that those are the.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see many opportunities to streamline this further than what it is. It does state clearly why we're doing this and what we
Okay.
hope to achieve.
Definition of agriculture.
Of the two possible definitions provided, I'm more fond of the first one, just because it's simple, it includes all legal farming operations without, just without getting into too much greater detail. Or mentioning best management practices, which I'm still not completely comfortable with including as part of our ordinance. Yet.
You already have them.
Yeah, but.
Hmm?
Yeah, but.
That's fine. Do you want to go down the line? Take your pick.
How you guys want to work this?
I vote
I
simple.
agree with him on the first one.
Okay.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
Hmm.
I vote simple, the first one.
Okay.
Because everything listed in the second one falls under one of those headings in the first one, but just more specific.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I mean, they're all covered with just fewer words.
Okay, so the first one it is?
And what are we excluding by choosing this first one? Or are we excluding anything, or are we including too much?
I think everything listed there, you could go back to one of the items listed on the first one. That's why I read it. It's just not as detailed, but the
It's also
The
not as
main title,
restrictive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Keep the definitions as simple as we can, so that we don't have to explain them later.
Yep.
All right. One of the,
So, okay, so you're gonna mean all operations of a farm. Agriculture use shall mean land used for agriculture. Agriculture and farming include plowing, tillage, farming. So are we saying that we, by incorporating the first one, then we're basically understanding that it includes everything that's in the second?
That's my interpretation. I didn't see anything that wasn't covered by one of the main headings on the first one.
Yeah.
one of the things we can do is after we make these revisions, if you guys would like, we can forward it to the different farms that we sat down and interviewed to get their opinion, and take on the draft and how they see it impacting them or not impacting them.
It's a very good idea. Get the stakeholders to review it for us and give us their feedback.
Okay,
And when you give it to them, I would highlight what's different from what's current.
okay,
This is what's being proposed to be changed or adjusted, so they know where to draw their eyes to the most.
okay.
Because they would best know if we're missing something in this short definition. Since I don't know what some of those things are.
Okay.
Moving on to agricultural processing plant. I see nothing there that gives me concern.
Okay.
Anyone reviewed that yet?
So the reason for including this was just simply, there was some conversation at the last meeting, about what that might be and where and whether it should be permitted and if it made sense in all zones. And I believe that's something that's flagged under the, permitted uses as another conversation to have here.
Okay, good.
The only thing is, if you're gonna use the first definition, in the second one, there's an exception, there's a couple of exceptions.
Okay.
And I think you would want to address those exceptions if you're going to
Okay.
use it. Because it says here, commercial logging and timber harvesting operations, except in feed yards. So there seems to be two things that are excluded in that maybe want to be addressed in that, so that people know. That's just a suggestion. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas.
And not being an expert on farming myself, I'm not sure where to draw the line on what sorts of uses are compatible and incompatible.
I mean, I don't know where, commercial harvesting and timber operations, what the town's position is on that.
Do we allow it now? Or is that something new if we say except commercial logging? We have some logging companies in town, but it's not I don't think they're commercial.
Yeah, that's something that,
That's
we don't have the
different.
land for a
Forestry
commercial
land.
operation to come
Yeah.
in.
Right.
It wouldn't be profitable enough for.
Yeah. If we had 1,000 acres of forest,
Yeah,
then I'd say, yeah. But what we have would be,
it's state forest.
but you wouldn't be doing that either.
Government's closed. I guess my bigger thing, if it's there now, maybe we should keep it, or is that just something that added in from the verbiage that you found from other towns or
This is just added in from the sample.
the sample ones? Okay.
Yeah, we went to a big fat dictionary of sample definitions.
Yeah, and even the feedlots, I don't think we have any in town. Or feed yards.
What is a feed yard? I mean, you have the grass-fed
A
cows
feed
across from the
yard,
elementary school.
literal interpretation is like the stockyards in Chicago, where they're all in big pens,
Okay.
and you're feeding them there on the way processing to the slaughterhouse. That would be a feed yard.
But we do have that in, not as big, but
that's
across
not-
from GMS, you have the,
Yeah, that's just one small family.
no, but I'm just saying to put in here would, I guess, but not having there, you're excluding it. Obviously, it's a business in town, it's a family business that they should be able to keep and hold on to. Maybe
Right.
we shouldn't do anything to
But
affect
I don't
that.
think he really has
I don't know how you
feed yard in
classify them.
that.
I don't know how you classify
I mean,
it.
a feed yard is a big operation.
Yeah.
And I mean, how many head of cattle does he have there?
All the elementary kids wonder where they go every once in a while. That's all they
And
say.
I think both of those exceptions could be taken out.
The cows go
Okay.
today.
I mean, it's, here again, we don't have the land in town to do a big feed yard operation.
I guess my point is just make sure we don't put verbiage that precludes him from having his business,
Right,
Mm-hmm.
and that,
because that's not right.
if you bring that down to the nitty-gritty, it would stop him from having them in a corral, feeding them there, as opposed to grazing in the field.
Maybe we should just take that out then.
Yeah, if we go to the other definition,
Yeah.
we don't even
Covers
need
it.
that.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
Yeah, we don't need either of those exceptions.
The other thing that would concern me, I mean, in terms of logging and timber harvesting, I mean,
Mhm.
I don't know, I mean, I just don't want to see, someone take advantage of that.
Okay.
And I guess my concern is if we're going to preserve the natural character of the town in terms of natural resources and so forth. I just feel that, I personally don't feel that, that we want to affect that somehow. I don't know. But
It's all definition too. How do you define commercial logging?
Right.
Someone having a tree removal business,
Yeah.
technically they're going in, cutting down trees, there's a loggers. It's a business, so it's commercial.
If you got a farm and you got trees in your farm, we can't tell them not to cut them.
I understand your point. You don't
Well,
give
no,
a
I
carte blanche
understand
for
what you're
an
saying,
operation. But the way this is worded, you're stopping the couple tree companies we have in town from doing their work too.
But at the same time, you're also affecting the natural character and the resources, that part of it is gonna be somehow
You
affected.
need to define it better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of what
well, I
commercial
mean,
logging is.
I think the only place in town I can think of where that would be effective is the state forest. That there's that many trees not on somebody's own property that you could harvest.
Right,
And-
I know, yeah.
But then, how many trees do we not even notice because there's so many of them there that are on private property that could be clear cut away one day
Right.
as part of a commercial operation?
But if it's private property, you have the right to cut down trees.
Right,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this
unless,
is New Hampshire.
unless the ordinance says otherwise.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, but if you own the property. I would just think you would, if you're gonna put commercial logging in, I understand your point, you don't wanna have what you see in like the North Country with logging companies. Cause, but they have
Yeah.
thousands of acres.
Right, but we don't have
I know,
thousands, yeah.
But you don't wanna preclude businesses and you don't wanna,
Right.
So if we can try and boil it down to the bottom line is clear cutting. And
Probably.
so that's what, maybe where we wanna draw that limitation.
Well, what if it's clear cutting with
Yeah.
the purpose of creating a farm field?
That's clear cutting.
That's a good
Well,
point.
it is.
if you're putting,
Like I say, it's a mute point because there aren't that many parcels with trees
Mm-hmm.
that you could come in and do a commercial operation in town, aside from the state forest.
if you put a housing development in, you have to allow clear
Right.
cutting to some degree. But that's controlled by the ordinance, right?
The housing piece, yeah.
Yeah, in terms of how much you can do or,
Mm-hmm.
that's covered there.
And that's basically common sense. When they come before us, we ask them not to clear cut. And most times they agree with us.
And
It's
you,
cheaper for them not to clear cut.
well, you also have in your site plan
Yep.
review regs that you're asking them
You
to
have to
leave
leave
the
your buffer and
majority,
everything else, so,
so, or leave whatever's possible.
yeah.
Okay. So bottom line, we should probably leave it open as something that we want to still look at, ensuring that there's some sort of
Yeah.
protection, but not being too
See what
restrictive.
other towns do, how they define it. To not have commercial logging.
Yeah, so we can,
I mean, commercial logging is just, to me, it could be anything.
okay,
Because commercial is a business and logging are trees.
all right.
So we don't want to lock the language down yet. We do want to work this a little bit more.
Yep.
think if we brought just that one piece into the first definition, it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Okay.
That should be right. H.
Under permitted uses, the agricultural
Yeah.
processing. Yeah, that one's a no-brainer.
Under the agricultural processing plant,
Yes.
the last sentence may include warehousing and packaging as secondary uses.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see a secondary use. I mean, we have permitted uses. Is there a secondary use? Did I miss something?
So the processing plant would be the primary, or the agricultural operation itself, the primary.
Okay.
But it's saying with an agricultural processing plant, it may also include warehousing and packaging as secondary to those operations.
You could bottle it and store it.
Maybe remove that statement and place it under 550.5, under permitted uses H, that says agricultural processing plants shall be permitted only if da-da-da-da, and, additionally, warehousing and packaging as secondary uses might be more
Okay.
appropriate.
I have a naive question, and I assume it's not the same thing, but if someone wants to slaughter animals in town, is that somewhere else? Is that processing? It's not agricultural processing, but are animals agricultural?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In this, do you allow a slaughterhouse in town?
Um,
Does someone want to do that?
So my understanding with the slaughterhouses is, regardless of whether you permit them or not to open, they have to be permitted by USDA.
So the USDA gets a final say over the town?
No, but they have to get a permit from USDA to open. So whether, so if they're not permitted in your town, then they're not permitted, bottom line. If they are permitted in your town, that doesn't mean they'll ever get a permit from
Okay.
USDA.
My point is, we don't have commercial in town because our whole town's in an aquifer district. I don't see how you could put a slaughterhouse on top of an aquifer district when you have blood and whatever seeping into the water. So my point of view would rather say it can't be allowed than,
Okay.
that's just my opinion, but I just, if we protect the town so much from the aquifer, why would we ever allow? And isn't aquifer like 90-something% of the town?
Yeah, pretty much.
So I don't see why you.
Plus, it becomes a nuisance
Well,
issue.
and I know the ordinance say nothing smelly or noxious or
Yep.
odors to your neighbors, and I think all those would apply.
Okay.
Although we get that good odor from the other side of the river.
Well, you get Budweiser.
No, I'm talking.
Oh, septic plant?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
In the summertime, it's awful.
Mm.
I don't know if that's where you would put it there, or if anyone else agrees that you should have something in there just to not make it an issue later.
I think either there, under the permitted uses and spelling out that they're not permitted, or within the definitions, just to be sure, it would be clear that slaughterhouses are not included as part of either an agricultural processing plant or agriculture itself. So those are, I think, the two ways you can deal with it.
Do we have, right now, the way it's worded, we don't say yes, but we don't say no?
It's not spelled out as something that is permitted, which means by default, it's not permitted.
Is that the easier way to do it? Then are we covered, with this definition of agricultural processing, are we covered?
I might want to include a note that says slaughterhouses are not considered an agricultural processing plant.
Sounds good. Short, sweet, and simple.
Okay. Okay. Does the list of permitted uses look okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I gotta make sure you flag that to the farmers and make sure that everything they do in their farms currently falls in there
Yeah,
and that they're not missing anything.
okay.
I would assume it does, but I don't wanna assume that.
And the BMPs, they have to follow pretty much anyway, right?
Yes, so what we did is we didn't make a change to this section at this point, but what we just did is a little bit of research. Currently, in your ordinance, you have under the, Wetlands Conservation District and the Aquifer Protection District, some existing BMPs that are required. Under section 1250, the cultivation and harvesting of crops according to recognized soil conservation practices using current and recognized best management practices. For example, list manual best management practices for agriculture in New Hampshire. Revised 1998 as amended, with diligent consideration of possible non-point sources of pollution caused by fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. In section 1258, exemptions, farming and associated activities. This is, I believe, exemptions to, is that the aquifer? To the aquifer, or that's one of the two. As an exemption, though, farming and associated activities are exempt in accordance with the manual best management practices. So in other words, as long as they're following best management practices, they're exempt from the ordinance requirement there. So those are already existing with your ordinance, within your ordinances. So the point for you is, if you feel that you're already covered, then this perhaps is moot here, or redundant, or unnecessary. Or you can reiterate it for the sake of reiteration.
And should the existing ordinance references to this ever change, that leaves this hanging, that it would also have to be changed?
Yes, I don't see that one as much of a issue, because it's another document that's referenced, it's included by reference, as opposed to, I guess, specific dimensional requirement, for example, that if it were to change in one piece, you'd have to come and then make sure that that specific reference was changed again.
Where that states just BMP period. If that changes, it stays with it. You'd take, like, if some of the best management practices,
Yep.
and they make a change in that, that would automatically come in.
Right.
We wouldn't
And
have
we
to
would-
change.
But we would also have no say in their changes.
We don't know.
And just by referencing them in our ordinance. Or,
Yeah, but I mean, this is pretty much standard that they use for all the farms.
okay.
But here again, we'll see what, they say about it when we send it out to them.
Yeah.
Thoughts from anyone else?
So you're gonna send it out to the Department of Ag, or what are you doing?
No, local farms.
Oh, local farm, oh, okay, all right.
Solicit some feedback
I'm sorry.
from some of the
That's
community
good.
experts.
I know a lot of them follow that anyway. but
Right.
Let them read it and see if it's, if they have any questions about it or concerns about it.
Right, okay. Mhm.
I mean, conversely, what are the penalties if they don't follow it? Meaning if they follow it as it's written now, I understand you want to reference it, but there's no, it's basically a guideline, isn't it?
I don't know if the state has any teeth in that or not.
I don't think so.
Advisory
But
more
yeah,
than it is-
yes, they
Yeah.
do, because if they mismanage the fertilizer or the manure,
Yeah.
the state can come in. I mean, it's a guideline for it, and
Yep.
if you do it so it's gonna cause harm to the environment, the state can come in and do something about it.
I mean, the Department of Environmental,
The county agent usually comes
County
in
agent, well, yeah.
and works with the farmer
Yeah.
with the best management practices.
So that, it polices them somewhat.
Okay.
Okay. We'll get some input. There's no changes to the rest of page 3.
Lot sizing.
Yeah, so the next portion where there's been some revisions was under lot sizing. So what we were looking at here before was just saying that any of the parcels that are 20 acres or greater just follow the existing conservation open space ordinance. But the question was then for those that are less than 20 acres, how do you proceed? And so we were trying to look at a way to allow for some clustering with those lots that are less than 20 acres that's more flexible than the conservation open space what's the COSD stand?
Open space
Forgetting that.
development.
Open
Con-
space
Yes,
design.
Conservation Open Space Development Ordinance. Thank you. Every town does it slightly differently. So one of the things we looked at was a really simple model for lot size averaging that just says average your lots. And that's essentially what this piece is here. So when you look at 550.7.6B, that's it.
So we don't have this definition now anywhere else?
Mm-mm. And this would only be for, lots that fall under the overlay district that are less than 20 acres and in the residential district.
well, just because I'm easily confused, suppose I was a developer and I had 3 parcels of land, one being 5 acres, another being 10 acres, another being 25 acres,
Ooh,
or some combination thereof, I just use that for. What would guide me here?
so if
I wanted to combine all 3 of them into one big subdivision.
they were all 3 contiguous lots, I would, if I were the
No, I'm saying,
developer?
according to this here,
Yep.
how would we interpret that?
Yeah, so I would say they'd come in and do a merger and use it as one lot, or proceed as it's 3 lots, but they would use the 20 acres or greater.
Okay.
and it would be for the application, and so perhaps that's a clarification. That's parcels or applications that are 20 acres or greater.
Yeah,
Parcels or an application of contiguous lots, or something to that.
or proposed assemblage of lots.
Okay.
So this would not allow cluster development then? You're saying average lot size is defined as the mean average of acreage of all lots in a proposed subdivision,
So
with the minimum requirements of the town, which is an acre.
right. Um,
So if you have 10 acres and the minimum is an acre, isn't average lot size an acre?
yes.
Isn't it?
So in other words, you could do, they could take and set aside a piece, because the other part of it is there's gotta be a open space piece. So they might take 5 acres, set that aside as open space, and then take on the remaining 5 acres and put the 10 houses on the remaining 5 acres. So combined, you still have 10 acres divided by 10 units, but you now have 5 acres of open space and 5 acres of houses. That's actually the next part that we have to discuss under 550.7.7. After you discuss the, whether that's something you even remotely want to consider.
Yeah, looks all right. You see anything?
The density bonus will let you get more than 10 houses
Yes.
on the 10 acres if you do give the town something else, and you put all 10 on 4 acres and they give 6 acres to open space or conservation.
Right.
But then you get into, we're all on septic, so we do really want to do that.
Right, and I know what I've heard from folks before in town is they don't like density bonuses.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think we really need it.
huh,
I agree, I don't
that's fine.
think you need it.
We threw it out there as a,
Yeah.
here's what's out there for samples from other places.
So that means all of C would be gone?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're gonna wipe out density bonus.
Yes. Is that okay?
I mean, what is there a, I guess I'm just trying to, what's the, like, unintended consequence of doing that? I don't know.
Of having
I'm
it or
trying
not
to, I'm trying to
having it?
look at both, both, the pros and the cons. I'm just, I don't wanna,
Right, the biggest is that we're a septic, and if you put single-family homes clustered that close together with a septic system, isn't there regulations on how much acreage you need anyway? So how much of a density can you really give?
Yeah, I mean, there are, but they can also, use a community system, which is not as
Common land.
necessarily as a desirable approach. I mean, there are ways around it, though.
Your wells could be on the common land.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are ways to do it.
When the HOP was done, is that done with density bonuses, or, I mean, because they are more clustered than what we're talking about with this, right? When those, I wasn't here when,
I don't, it was repealed
How were
before.
they done, Joan?
I don't think they had density bonuses.
Wasn't there, it was just that,
you're allowed certain number of units on per acre.
it was the total acreage
Right.
of the parcel.
Right.
Yep. And then you figure an open space conservation land.
Yeah,
you back
because
that
we
out.
have, I mean, like on ours, the actual developed land is like about a third of it, the land that we own.
Yep.
And that's all on septic,
Okay.
but it's not on wells.
Yep.
Okay. does the way the lot size averaging piece is drafted make sense?
Yeah.
Sound good?
That basically, it does get rid of C.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
One question, I know in the past when we were looking at this and discussing it, we said, well, how many parcels do we have that would actually be less than 20 acres that this would apply to? So we went and pulled just roughly west and east of 3A, looking at that just general area, the number of agricultural and vacant parcels, and you've got the posted up there on the site, draft land use analysis, and in there's a count of parcels on the third page. Of the agricultural parcels, there's 20 out of 41 in the area are 20 acres or greater. 12 are in the 10 to just under 20 category, and then there's the remaining 9 are less than 10 acres, just to kind of give you a feel for what there is. Then for vacant properties or vacant parcels, they're pretty evenly split, anywhere from 1 acre all the way up to more than 20 acres in terms of the count. So
it's good to have this.
yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you'd only be capturing half of your parcels, or less than half of your parcels when you take into consideration the vacant piece with the 20 acre threshold. One question on the purpose of the lot size averaging. This is more generic language in that first sentence of B1. I might almost recommend refining that to be more specific to the purpose in this particular instance of why you're permitting lot size averaging, and that is to maintain some agricultural lands along your Route 3A corridor.
Yeah, that would help clarify, wouldn't it?
You probably put that in the middle of the third sentence. Right after, retain areas for open space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Also in paragraph 1 there, it's just a picky thing, it says the average lot size shall be defined as the mean average of the acreage.
Just the average.
Mean and average mean the same thing.
I know.
I don't know unless you were trying to say weighted average.
It's just the
That's
average.
Yeah.
Just the average.
The simple mathematical average. What was that, third grade math now? Fourth grade?
Fourth grade, I think.
Fourth
Fourth
grade.
grade?
Average.
There we go. That's all we're asking.
I think it looks good.
Okay. Next part to work on was the required open agricultural lands. This is your, what do you want to set as your thresholds for what your expectation is for the minimum percent of the development that's going to be set aside as that open space or the agricultural.
But you still have the average lot size. So if you have 10 acres, 2 are wetlands, that brings it to 8. And if you do 50%, that brings it to 4. So you're putting 10 houses on 4 acres. But it doesn't really work.
Well, you would, no, because you would be deducting out your wetlands
Before you do the
before
average.
you start.
Do we define that
Because
up
you're
top?
develop, that's part, I think that's part of your definitions under developable,
Okay.
but we can double check that.
Or maybe define that in paragraph 1 of B,
Okay.
just so there's no confusion. I think kind of 50 is a lot.
Yep.
Because these aren't condos or condexes or multifamily, these are single-family homes.
Right.
But still, on the remaining 50% of the land, they can't put up any more than is required for, the regular subdivision, right?
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not,
But if we're doing lot size averaging, then we're telling them how many they could do based on the total
well,
acreage
this
of
is
the
for
lot.
parcels that are already over 20 acres.
Oh, so we're not even talking about this other thing.
We're not talking about the other.
Right, and so this is the net acreage remaining after all areas of wetlands have been subtracted. So you take your lot, and say it's a 100-acre lot, and say you have 20 acres of wetlands, you subtract out your 20 acres. So then you have 80 acres where you would otherwise be able to develop and put single-family homes on them. Which means, assuming those 80 acres are
So that's 80
contiguous
homes.
1-acre parcels, or contiguous 1-acre pieces, that's 80 homes. So then those 80 homes would go on 40 acres, and the other 40 acres would be that open space.
But those 80 homes still have to meet all of the requirements for septic system use and all that type of stuff, is that correct?
Correct.
For well usage and so on and so forth. So, I don't know, does 50% sound like a lot?
But don't forget, here again, your septic can go on the open area.
Yeah.
Septic doesn't have to go on the house lot.
Okay,
They could go in the open land.
But you're building these as.
And the open land doesn't have to be over here and the house is over here. You could have 5 or 6 houses, an open area, 5 or 6 more houses like in a cluster, then another open area.
But you're not building this as a community with monthly fees. You're building this as a
Wait, wait,
neighborhood with single.
Whatever you're building,
Yeah.
I can still follow that same design.
Time out. So you're gonna say, just assume that we're gonna use 50%, that 50% could be 10% here, 10% there, 10% there, then how would you retain that as open agricultural land?
The
That doesn't
total-
make
the
sense.
Total.
It has to be contiguous.
All right, so that's one piece. We need to make sure it's contiguous.
If it's contiguous, then you can't have it at 50%.
Okay, what would you think would be, I mean, we threw out 50 as a sample. This is, and it's completely flagged for conversation.
I wouldn't
50
mind-
came from another municipality. I don't remember which. So
What
it's
do you think?
not,
I wouldn't go more than 40.
If it's more than 20, it goes to the conservation open space development ordinance.
correct.
And in that ordinance, how do we define, could you put it 2 single-family houses? Can you, in that ordinance, do we allow cluster developing houses with common wells and common septic? Because if we preclude that from happening under that ordinance, we
Precluded.
can't put it in here as allowing it, or we're going against our own ordinance.
Right, I don't think that's precluded, is it?
I don't know. I've never used it.
No, I mean, the thing is right now, the existing, conservation open space, does not have a minimum set aside.
Does it allow shared septic, shared water? Does it allow you to build like that, more like a community? Then would be a neighborhood's a community, but then single-family homes with their own sustainable resources on each lot.
Let me, before I make things up, look at the actual ordinance. And we'll try and do a quick. Okay, actually it's up earlier.
Because you want to preserve the agricultural space, but you also don't want to look like a little city by shoving all these single-family homes so close together.
Joan, what would be a good example of an
Development
existing
down
conservation
the
open
store in
space
Hudson on 3A.
development
Yeah.
in town for the board to visualize?
It
We
just
haven't- we
aesthetically is
haven't
horrible.
used it ever.
You haven't used it ever?
No.
Sliding bar,
Oh,
saying that we look like horrible development.
really?
Yeah, watch this
Hey.
video, guys.
The first one probably be
No,
coming
it's-
soon.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
Was just adopted in
Actually, like yours, I
2010.
think. Yours, you can't see from the hill, but I live near yours, and I think it's
I like it.
aesthetically, you don't even notice it's there.
That's what we like always. You should take her right up there someday.
It's never gone up that hill. I always usually scream at my kids when I'm driving home past your development. Time for homework. But yours, you drive by it and you don't really, because I've been on Pinecrest for 16 years, and I was, they used to be a forest, and you don't really, so you don't miss the forest. You still have the open space from Moose Hollow behind them. You still have all the
Yeah,
wetlands back
that's all,
there.
that's all open back there.
But you had a good developer too. You did a nice job.
Or
See, in the winter, we can't,
time
in the summer, we
conditions,
can't even see
location.
the houses over in Manchester, which are right behind us. Because we
The
have a
trees,
50-foot
yeah.
buffer there.
What you should have.
Conservation open space developments is permitted in the residential district and requires public water and individual on-site subsurface systems.
Requires public water?
So it says.
Do we have public water along 3A?
Some parts.
Parts of it,
It's
yeah.
not the whole thing though.
Not the whole thing.
Mm-mm.
That kind of defeats that.
Uses common area, minimum tract size. The parent lot of a conservation open space development shall be at least 10 contiguous acres.
I just think if you have a community septic, like one big septic area for 5 houses, if there's a problem with a septic, you're gonna have 5 neighbors who hate each other because they don't have a community, so there's no dues every month, and you're gonna have people like shotguns, going nuts because, who's gonna pay for it? You're gonna
Right.
people will be pissed off at each other. So unless we make it an association like an HOP would be, where you
Right.
have monthly dues, you pay in for maintenance, I don't think you should force residents to buy into an area, because then you have to, what about the whole thing with your title? Because you all own part of that common area, right, for your septic and water?
All right, so now,
But then it's technically multifamily, isn't it then? Do you want to go there?
no, it would not be technically, no, so what it would be, would be if you did it as single-family homes, but on commonly owned land, it would be
Condos.
detached single-family condos.
Which is what
So then you would have your
multifamily
fees.
is though, because the whole deal of multifamily is common land with clustered housing.
But they're still single-family homes. Right. Okay, so here's your other bits that you have under your conservation open space development ordinance. So one, your minimum lot size is 20 acres. Your parent lot has to be 10 acres, so that's the one that you kind of,
Built into.
that you kind of carve out as the, think about it when you do your subdivision. So you've got lot 10-10, right? So you keep lot 10-10 as this 10 acre, and then you have 10-10-1, 10-10.2. That's part of it. So then your building lot size. So all those other lots, the minimum size is half an acre of contiguous dry land. Alternative lot sizing, the board may authorize variations from the minimum lot size, provided the planning board determines the following conditions are met. All lots comply with their subsurface waste requirements, their septic, and the maximum density determined is not exceeded. So whatever they figure out they would be allowed to do otherwise isn't exceeded.
Can you fit, like most houses now, 2,000 square feet or 20, whatever? Can you fit that in a half an acre with the space you need for a septic and the driveway and everything else?
Depends on the quality of the
Yeah,
soil.
because your half acre is still a decent amount of space. Think of it,
20,000 square feet.
you have, think of a good footprint example. that you might
I
actually
assume they looked
see.
at it when they wrote that because they said you could do it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I assume whoever was here researched that and figured that was okay. And then septic systems are probably smaller now than they used to be.
Much smaller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The bigger issue with septic systems is not the actual size of the system, but the reserve area
It's
that you're
99%.
required to provide to show that you can fit it in. The reserve area now, the minimum reserve area hasn't essentially kept pace with the actual sizes of the systems themselves, so you're required to show a significantly larger reserved location than that system will ever be.
It's not gonna be another 2 or 3 years when you won't even need a leach field. They have systems now that fit in the basement, they're complete. And the water-
My basement.
No, I mean, seriously, they have systems.
What do those cost?
They're probably right now about 4 times what a septic system is outside, but they're coming down all the time.
Like anything that's new, right?
But if you don't have the land,
Yeah, true.
if you're sitting on a ledge,
I guess the biggest issue is the public water, according to the way it's written now.
Right, which I didn't realize that was a requirement in the conservation open space. And honestly, I think you could still do this and not have public water. I think you could meet your well requirement and your septic requirements and be just fine. I don't think that you would need to require.
So we're better off doing single-family homes, or we're better off doing association?
I say you're better off not even
Single-family
getting
homes.
into that conversation and let the applicant decide how they want to structure that.
But is the applicant allowed to have an association? Do we
Yes.
have to allow, we don't have to say it's okay to do it?
You don't have to say it's okay. No, because you don't regulate ownership.
Okay, so they could come in and design it that way if they want to.
If they are, and they have legal documents, so you say, thank you, I'd like to see all the legal documents and send them to council for review.
And plus, they have to meet whatever standards,
Mhm.
but, yeah, that's.
There are states, condominium association, requirements that they need to meet under statute, which Tom's very familiar with.
been over there many times.
So if you do the math backwards with the 50%, if you take out the wetlands and you do half acres for each house with septic and individual well,
Mhm.
doesn't that get you to the open space requirement? Because it contradicts themselves. If you say open space requirements 50%, but with a half acre for 10 houses,
Mhm.
you can't mathematically get 50% open space because we say
Right.
you're allowed a half an acre.
Well, the 50% matches the half an acre, so your minimum lot size. So the way it's written here for your minimum lot size, the language that's used there under the Conservation Open Space Development Ordinance matches the language in your single-family housing. The only thing that's different is it says half acre instead of 1 acre of that dry contiguous land per lot. So essentially, that is by de facto a 50%. It's saying you can go down to 50% of what you are otherwise permitted. The difference is by requiring a 50% set aside, you are mandating they go down to the minimum lot size of half an acre, as opposed to letting them have it be greater than half an acre. So that's your call. And, going back and rereading it, maybe we pull it out and we just simply say that the unused acreage is contiguous. The unused set aside is contiguous. I might want a minimum threshold though of what, because what's the point in requiring
There's no
If you're not gonna
T5.
have set aside.
if you're not gonna get a meaningful set aside?
Right.
Well, then I would go with 40%. I think that's reasonable. 50% is too much.
So according to this, if you have 10 acres and no wetlands,
Mhm.
you could have 20 houses
No,
on a half acre each.
if you have 20 acres and no wetlands, you could have 20 houses on 10 acres.
Half-acre lots.
No, no,
He just said the same thing.
yeah.
Did I?
10 acres.
Did I totally miss it and screw it up then?
So if you have 10 acres, you could put 20 houses on half acre
No,
lots.
10 houses.
No, if you have 10 acres, you can have 10 houses.
If you have
Because it still comes
50%
back to
back.
it still comes back to the average of one house per acre.
Okay, even though you're only requiring half an acre of land.
Right, because the other half is set aside.
But it's only
That's
half.
if it's 50%. If it's 40% or 30%, don't
You still can't permit more than that would be allowed under the underlying zoning district. And under the underlying zoning district, it's 10 acres, 10 houses. 10 dry acres, 10 houses, we should say.
So by doing 40%, you allow a little wiggle room in terms of the lots and how they're
Yes.
set aside.
You know, we've been excluding any talk of infrastructure like roads and stuff like that, so that extra 10%.
That comes out. Yeah, that's
That comes out of your 50%.
Oh, that comes out of
Yeah.
50%.
Yeah.
Set aside 50% or out of the
I'll
built?
set aside.
Uh,
But, you know, either way, but still, 40%, 50% is too tight.
Yeah.
40% makes much more sense. Because then you can go a little bigger on your lot size if you wanted to.
Mhm.
I mean, you know yourself, no lot is perfectly rectangular or square.
right.
That you're gonna be able to cut these half-acre
Yeah.
lots out.
Well, think about that last subdivision you guys had. And how it was,
On Hamel Road.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, how difficult it was for them to
Carve up reasonably.
carve up
sized
reasonably.
lots.
And
Yeah.
mathematically, if you took the number of acres they had and divided it by the total number of units they could have had, they didn't hit that. Purely because some of the lots just were forced to be much larger because they couldn't do it. So, just because the configuration was difficult. So,
I think we should go with the 40. That gives you a little more breathing room.
okay. All right, then for lots less than 20 acres. So here's the issue with lots less than 20 acres. You're gonna have less land, which means you have less wiggle room. So I think my thought is that you have to have a tiered system and you can't require as much of a set aside with a smaller parcel than you can a larger parcel simply because you're just gonna have more constraints on the smaller parcel in terms of your ability to configure that lot.
Yeah, looking at Hamel. Look at their total
Exactly.
acreage was 20? It was around 20,
Thereabouts.
20-ish.
It was less than 20 because it didn't trigger the open space.
Okay.
Well, and you didn't have public water.
Is 25% reasonable in the sense, is that doable considering or workable? Considering the smaller total size?
I think it's reasonable. Okay. We still have a lot to get through tonight. All right, so are we okay with those sections?
25% on under 20 acres?
Okay. So the next part, there's actually presented two different options for how to approach this next section, section 550.7.8. Let me refresh my memory now for how we did this. Okay, so option one pulled forward language from the Conservation Open Space Development Ordinance. Option two, I didn't give myself a cheat sheet for what option two is. Option two says for lots 20 acres or greater, refer to the Conservation Open Space Subdivision Ordinance. For lots less than 20 acres, just had some straightforward language of how the protections are to be set on the open space area.
going back to what we just finished, are you gonna look at the conservation ordinance and take off the public water? Or
Yeah,
don't
that's
we
a
have to
good
address
question.
that? We have to address that somehow, don't we?
Do you want, I mean, is that an amendment that you would want to do to the conservation open space and to take out the public water piece?
No, I think we want to encourage the development of the public water system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you could do in here just a kind of a clause that says if connection to a public water system is not feasible, then well is okay, so long as you can demonstrate.
Well, anything that's gonna cost money to a developer is not gonna be feasible. It's in the best interest, so I don't see why we would do that if we want to encourage, you know, the use of public water. I mean, it's just basically, if I was a developer, it's strictly cost-benefit analysis. What does
Yeah.
it cost me to put in 10 or 15 or 20 wells versus running down to, you know, getting to the public water supply? If you give me that option, I'm gonna take whichever is most cost-effective and not necessarily in the best interest of either the town or the people that are buying those homes.
Ordinarily, I would not hesitate. I hesitate because of a recent Supreme Court case. Shaking your head. The Kuntz decision deals with off-site exactions, and any off-site improvements that you're looking for from your applicant has to meet the rough proportionality and nexus requirements of a takings case.
But what?
Takings,
Eminent domain.
eminent domain.
Well,
Or, yeah, not necessarily eminent domain, but anything
Yeah,
that's a
it's-
taking.
yeah.
So what that means is if you're even saying to the developer, listen, your application is gonna have traffic impacts to my community, and to that road in front of you, therefore, we demand you install that traffic signal that's now gonna be required down the street. Does it balance out? Is it proportional to the impact that's directly being created by that development? And if it might be seen as exceeding that, you can't do it. You can't ask the developer to do anything beyond their property bounds, or even anything on their property bounds that's granted. So for example, if you're asking for a right-of-way across their land, because now, to use another court case, the view to the ocean front has been blocked. Is that demand equal to what the public, is losing, and to what you're asking that developer to provide? So it's new, and we don't know, and it hasn't necessarily been tested, and so what are the limits, and how far can that go? And so if you've got somebody who's a couple miles from the closest water connection, can you demand that they can't develop or they can't do X, Y, or Z unless they make those couple miles of pipe happen?
But if I heard you correctly, we're already stating that
Right.
that we want it to be. We already have it in there.
Right,
Okay.
I know. And just because it's already in there doesn't mean now, based on that,
Can't be sued on it.
yeah, it doesn't mean that you can't be sued on it. So that would be something where if the person was, 2 miles away from that nearest connection, they'd be like, that's a hardship, I'm applying for a variance. I can't connect to that, I'm not going to connect to that.
But that's something that the developer would then have to prove, right?
Yeah,
you'd have to show
Why would
standard.
we- Why would we
Yeah.
why would we take that away? Why would we just arbitrarily make it easy for a developer by saying, okay, you don't have to connect to a public water system if it, if you gotta shovel 10 feet out further in the street or whatever. I would leave it in there and let the developer come and prove to the board here.
that
Request
it's
a
too
waiver.
far.
Basically a hardship, and then we could make an exception for that
Yeah.
case.
I agree.
Okay. Would you want that to be something that would, be a conditional use application to you, the planning board, or a variance application to the zoning board?
Why couldn't it be done on a waiver at the time the plan's submitted?
Because it's in zoning.
Yeah, because it's a legal,
Oh,
it's a legal challenge.
Yeah.
It's its own.
So if you, so here's the thing, you can put in, and it already is in there, in your conservation open space subdivision. You already have a conditional use permit that you have been authorized to grant. Where is it? Scrolling up. Okay, the planning board may issue a conditional use permit for the parcel to be developed as a conventional subdivision, as opposed to a conservation open space subdivision. If there are specific, things that the applicant can demonstrate. So the rules for a conditional use permit are that you can say, the board is allowed to allow you to do something different. The planning board is allowed to let you do something different, so long as you can prove X, Y, and Z. But those requirements have to be clearly stated, in your ordinance for what they must demonstrate. If it's in the zoning ordinance and it's not something that the board can issue a conditional use permit for, and there's no kind of criteria, and they can't or won't comply with it, they have to go get a variance from the zoning board. So in this case right now, as currently written, they would have to go to the zoning board to get a variance. If they wanted to do a conservation open space subdivision, but could not make that water connection.
So I'd say leave it just the way it is.
I'm wondering now if that's why this was written
The way it
the
is.
way it is, because it kind of eliminates that whole issue, so to speak, you know what I mean? In terms of, connecting and,
It makes it unusable land.
Wait. Oh. Helps if I completely read. Oh, you can do a conventional subdivision if public water is not available to the site. But the bottom line is, if public water is not available to the site, then you're forcing them to develop in a way that uses up more land resources.
Say if there's no public water, you have to have no open spaces out the window,
Open spaces out the window, 1 acre lots,
like anywhere else.
which means less trees, more lawns.
Yes.
So getting
Why is it
back
written
to,
that way? How's that conservation?
huh?
How is that conservation?
It's not.
Using more resources.
So why can't you just,
Less rural character.
yeah, so why don't we just, take that clause that they have for the conventional and put it into the conservation? Instead of saying if there's no water, it's a conventional development, say there's no water, that the wording for conventional development is, if there's no water within what radius of the development, you don't have to have town water? Is that
I don't think
how is
we-
it quantified?
We don't, it's not, I don't believe.
you gotta be careful with specifying a radius, because the economic viability of a greater radius based on the subsurface conditions could be more amenable than if you have like hard ledge in a short distance.
Yeah.
So right now, we just have it as, you can't, if you say you can't get access to it for your development, you don't have to have it for conventional developments and under 20 acres.
No, if you
Conservation
don't
open
have, you
space.
have to go
There's-
with conventional.
Yeah,
That's what I'm saying, with conventional, it says you could do wells if water's not there.
right.
Yeah,
but they have
Yeah.
to demonstrate,
They have to demonstrate they can't connect to public water.
Right.
but how do you qualify what demonstrate is? And is 2 feet versus 100 feet? I mean,
Well, I
like,
guess
that's
that would be
nitpicking
up to
the
the
law, I
planning
mean, that's what
board.
lawyers
Yeah,
do,
it's-
or,
It's a case-by-case
Yeah.
decision.
Yeah.
That would be up to the zoning board.
but instead of making it from conservation to conventional, aren't we better off saying you could have wells in a conservation, so we always keep the open space? Because then you're losing the benefit of what conservation does.
But the developer has the benefit, if he does choose to go the conservation route, of less infrastructure development, because the houses are more
Yes,
tightly
I'm saying if
clustered.
you don't have town water, instead of saying you have to have a conventional development, we say you still have to have a conservation development, but you can put wells in. Because right now you're saying you could do wells, but you could have you could do 1 acre, no open space, clear cut the whole thing and
Yep.
throw houses in. So wouldn't conservation ordinance encourage conservation and not clear cutting?
It would,
Right.
but also,
So-
you're giving the builder, by allowing him to build on smaller lot sizes and conserve the unused land as undeveloped, he doesn't have to sink any money into
That's what
developing
I'm saying, it would be win-win for everyone to allow wells and conservation developments if water's not available, as opposed to a conventional
Get a
development
whole
where
lot more, yeah.
you cut anything
I'm
down.
gonna read another paragraph. After I read this paragraph, I want you to ask yourself, do you think that under this paragraph, you could have an application come in and say, I can't connect to public water, I have to have wells, but I want to be a conservation out open space. Will you let me go forward and not meet that requirement? The planning board may issue a conditional use permit for a modified conservation open space development design to allow for variations from certain requirements of the section as specified herein. Such modifications shall be consistent with the purposes and standards of this section, fall within the guidelines contained herein, and shall not be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare.
Who knows?
You're losing fire protection without the water, town water. So that's detrimental to safety.
You require a cistern. As part of the conditional use, you've got to have adequate water supply for fire protection.
I would say, I'm not counsel, I would say if I were sitting down talking with an applicant and they wanted to say, okay, can I do this with wells? I'd say you could have to ask the planning board, but I would look to this piece and say, request a conditional use permit and ask the planning board if they'd let you do wells.
There's our catch-all for the special circumstances that we adjudicate on a case-by-case basis.
So it's a hardship issue.
So they come in and say, I can't do it, but I really want to protect the conservation values of this land.
And not have to pave miles of it to get the houses an acre apart each.
Yep.
Why don't we just
It's
put
paid,
it
it's
that if
expensive.
there is no public water, you can still have, why make a developer say, I want to do the conservation, make them do the conservation? So why even give the option of a conventional development?
Why are you giving the option of?
Yeah.
Because you're gonna have every now and then a piece of land that you just, it's junk. You can't do it.
Like the land just below Watts Brook, you can't get a water line down to it from the north. You can, but it's extremely expensive because you have to go under the culvert.
Yep.
And you have bridges the other way, culverts the other way. So that piece of land would be extremely difficult and expensive to get water to.
All right, so leave it as is.
It's
I
right
think,
top of an
I think
aquifer.
we just had a whole little educational learning experience here and we resolved the question and it's all moot. Would be my. And now we all know the conservation open space ordinance a little bit better.
Yep.
And we learned something about recent Supreme Court cases.
That's great. I mean,
Covering, it's like a little mini workshop tonight.
It's a Tuesday evening well spent.
You're talking about law lectures tomorrow night.
2 for 1.
So, the question is, which approach do you like better for 550.7.8? And we need to talk commercial.
That mean time's up.
I think the second one's safe, don't you?
thought I should
Well,
know.
I think it's gonna be in it.
I think the second one, because you refer back to the ordinances that you have to maintain without making it too wordy.
Yeah.
And that way, if the referenced section changes, we don't have to change everything
Right.
further down.
Number 2.
Number two. Number 2.
It's too wordy.
That's 4 out of,
Lawyers,
6.
lawyers like words, so.
Yeah.
or you like, do you like option 1?
Well, you know, I'm, maybe it's just me, I'm just, you know, I wanna make sure that, you know, get everything in there.
So everything that's in option 1 is in the conservation open space
Mhm.
ordinance.
Okay,
So when you look at option 2, that covers B.
oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
So what it is those lots that are smaller than 20 acres would have their own smaller, simpler set of rules.
Yeah, I like option 2.
Okay. Yeah, option 2 is fine.
Alrighty.
Is it basically you're incorporating
By reference.
by reference?
Mm-hmm. Okay. 550.8 is completely reworked from the last time you saw it. Again, for those 20 or larger, just refers back to the review process for existing ordinance.
Can you, instead of strongly encourage, can you just say mandates pre-appointment, pre-application review?
I don't know that you can mandate a pre-application review.
You can't, all right.
I don't know. You can't
Who would bear the cost of staff time? It would be the planning board that would eat that because it's not part of the application, right?
There might be all the boards, maybe the zoning board, planning board, police, fire, could be anybody.
well, you already require for conservation open space pre-application review. Joan, how would you structure that in terms of escrow? Pre-application review.
I think there is a line item, I believe, for design review and pre-application.
But would it fall under like the regular circuit rider town costs, or do you?
Pre-application?
Yeah, or do you,
Yeah, it should, so they'd have to put up escrow then,
so that it would come out of escrow?
yeah.
Oh, good.
You're better off requiring it so that you don't have any surprises after. And I would think it would be in the benefit of the developer to not waste his time if there's an issue in the very beginning. If we require it for 20 acres or more, why wouldn't we for 20 acres or less than 20 acres? Just because it's a smaller scale?
It's not required for the larger. It strongly encourages for the larger. Part of it is that, preliminary review is non-binding,
You know, it says shall not bind the applicant.
right?
or the applicant.
But even under statute, it's not binding.
So if it's not binding, you can't require.
So, right, your pre-application is just kind of the sit down. generally it's for the applicant to have an opportunity to sit down with the board and figure out what's feasible, what's not feasible, the direction that they should go, test out some ideas before they officially submit.
If we were to mandate that for lots less than 20, we would want to go back and reword
Right.
the,
For all of them.
yeah, the
Oh, that's true.
conservation open
Yep.
space to mandate it for all.
And, you know, I think if you strongly encourage it, I think most of them would take it. I mean, it's a lot cheaper for them to come in and do this before they come before us.
Mm-hmm.
And do up their plans, because this is before they have their plans drawn up and everything. They're just using a rough set of plans.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously it's their choice, and obviously if they're encouraged to do it, then it's gonna help them versus if they decide not to. And,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
you know.
It gives us the awareness of what's coming up for actual applications.
I think the rest is fine.
Yeah.
All right.
It's the end of the document.
So you'll have another revision, but what we'll do is we'll make the revisions we talked about tonight. We'll get some additional feedback from the existing farmers in town, and then we'll come back when we've got a compilation of their comments on the draft as well for you for consideration, just so you'll have a little bit more meat to review.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay.
So next on the agenda is the non-residential zoning revisions.
It's shorter and easier to say that than commercial transitional, commercial
Yeah.
industrial.
Where did I put those?
Did they end up with a, did you give them your copy? Middle. No, it'll go fast. It won't be that. This is everything. This is. It's a lot, but there's not that many changes. Like this is the same in everything. So some of them it just repeats. Give you a quick overview of what you have in front of you for a draft. Based on the conversation from the last meeting where we looked at the 6 different commercial, transitional, and commercial industrial ordinances, we looked at them all at once. So when we talked about frontage for all 6 simultaneously. I've now started the process of applying that conversation throughout to each of the individual districts. So it looks a lot longer than it is. A lot of it repeats. Part of the conversation last week and where we need some more direction from you for how to proceed, it was on the performance-based components, so what you expect of a development in terms of its impact on the surrounding or its impact on the community, such as where that parking is located or landscaping that's required to screen unsightly features, etc. And we started looking at this, that there were 2 different possible ways that that could be incorporated. if you felt that those standards would be common for all 6 districts, rather than repeat it 6 times, it could be included in section 400 of the ordinance under general provisions, just as a new piece at the end of 400. And then you could refer to that in each of the individual sections. And so what you have at the beginning of the draft is that language plunked down in section 400.
Makes more sense.
So that's one option. If you look, starting in section 600, the highway commercial, we've done is started to make those changes. Under performance standards, mentioned that there are these performance expectations, and should be included as part of the site plan application. But 600, I took the alternative approach where you can just include that language specifically in the district. You might want to go that route if you wanted to customize those performance requirements to the individual districts. So I didn't know if there were any specific approaches you wanted to take on a district by district basis. So section 600 shows, if you keep flipping, you get to the very bottom of page 7. It shows those exact same section of language that was in 400. It shows it repeated here in 600, just so you can see how it might look if you wanted to go that approach. Other changes that were made here in section 600 and then throughout all of the additional ones were the use changes that you had identified at the last meeting. I've added in here to each of the individual districts because that was something that you discussed on a district by district basis at the last meeting. Frontage, done a draft modified way of approaching the frontage requirement, and that is, it's here in 600 and it repeats verbatim in the other 5 districts. The other thing you asked for some language clarifications on was the site coverage, and that was looking to match language regarding impervious surfaces in the Aquifer Protection District, and that again repeats, it's here in 600 and repeats in the additional 5 districts verbatim. So if we amend it once, I'll carry it through to all the others, however you want to make any changes. Okay, so then you see the performance pieces that are specific to 600. In section 700, took the other approach of, rather than putting all those performance pieces in 700, I showed you what it would look like if you look at page 10, 700.03, added a new item C that says all applications shall meet the general requirements for non-residential uses as set forth in section 408 of this ordinance. And that then pulls in those additional performance requirements rather than repeat them. For the remaining 4 districts, I did not address those performance-based requirements, such as the landscaping and the parking, etc., because we need your guidance on what you want to do or how you want to approach that. That's the big picture. The other kind of big picture guidance item to look at on a district by district basis, just to make sure things were consistent with what we were doing in the agricultural overlay district. Those agricultural uses, including, A through H, I brought forward those A through H here. The question is H, or in this case here where it goes to a numbering system, 7, agricultural processing plants, which districts do they go in, which districts do they not go in, because that's something in the ag ordinance that that we have drafted that says where permitted by the underlying district. And so this is where you would specify where they're permitted in that underlying district. So that's a big, so which of the, so that is one question of which of the the 6 non-residential districts would you be willing to have those agricultural processing plants be located in? So that's in a nutshell what you have here in front of you. Love to get as much input and direction on this now so we can keep moving forward and stay on track. Just to kind of give you a heads up on schedules moving forward, I went through and counted out the town meeting hearing deadlines. First figure, you need your first hearing in December, your second hearing in January. You should, I would recommend you consider, or I would recommend you assume you will need 2 hearings. And I would recommend a good push for inviting as many people who want to and can attend to get them to that first hearing and use it as a public input session, and really get the word out, especially for that first hearing, so that we can use it as a, tell us what you think, let's change it, let's do what we need to do to make this work.
Put the best product out for the second hearing.
Exactly. So. How do you want to break it down? It's getting late.
Still early. Last meeting ran longer than this.
I know.
We're just warming up.
What's your priority in terms of what you want to see done tonight? You want us to go to certain sections that will help you more to prepare for next time?
Can I fire questions at you? Does that work?
Yep.
Sure.
Okay. Question, I guess the first question would be, when you think about those performance requirements, so to give you a quick overview, that's outside storage, access to the site, landscaping, parking, character, lighting standards, and screening of unsightly features. Not even assuming that we're gonna go with all of those. Those are just the ones we threw out there for examples. Are those things that you would want to address on a district-by-district basis, or have a common set of standards across the board?
Well, with those things you mentioned, I don't think there'd be any real necessity to look at each district individually. I think that, as we discussed them somewhat last week, I think that would be applicable across all districts.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't think we need that granularity across the various districts because there's so much commonality of use or intended use across them.
okay.
Good night, folks.
Good night.
Thanks for coming.
I think you want to be consistent too, because none of these districts are huge, and a lot of them touch each other. So why would you want it to not be,
Okay.
The same look and feel?
Okay. So assuming that you want to have one common set, you want to put them in 400 and then reference them in
Yep.
each of the individual? I love that one.
So you can do uniform, make it uniform.
Yeah.
Across the board.
Include it by reference, which drives me crazy when I'm looking through trying to but makes a lot more sense as we're drafting it.
It keeps your ordinance overall shorter too.
It does.
A little less scary.
And it makes any revisions much easier.
Because you're adding one spot, right?
Okay, so.
Something.
Exactly.
So question 1 is resolved, so it's a yes to putting it in section 408.
Yes.
Okay, so then because there's actually nothing on page 1 or 2 to look at or review. That was merely included for your own reference of what's already there. So then let's go through pages 3 and 4, if that works, and just go through those, each of those individual things. If we do it from the perspective of not wordsmithing, but big picture, maybe we can get through the big picture and save wordsmithing for another day, or as we get further down, and,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, let's build the concept.
all right. Outside storage. So this just says that storage areas will be screened, so no one else has to look at them.
Seems reasonable to me.
Going to 2. Vehicular access.
Why do you say one or more curb cuts? Do you want to limit the number of curb cuts that you have? And I know it's based on the feet between curb cuts.
We also want to have a good, safe traffic flow.
Yeah, so you want to, but do you want to limit the number that each parcel has? I know it's 200, no, 300 feet?
Yeah, but some properties you can't, you do actually need
The
an
second.
entrance and an exit,
Yeah.
depending on the type of operation.
That's a good point, though. If you're trying to encourage people to share driveways, I think B and C are the more important pieces than necessarily A. So B being that it's gotta be safe and not impede traffic flow. And C being, that you can't be within 50 feet of an existing intersection, because again, that's a safety issue. But A, if we're trying to encourage shared driveways, perhaps A disappears. Thoughts?
Why can't we change that to, from a public right-of-way or shared driveway?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just about to suggest that.
Treat my sickle like.
Okay. Part 3, landscaping.
It's fine.
So some of the things I heard at the last meeting was that you want applicants to keep mature trees, particularly mature trees, because it takes a long time to get new ones back. And you want to see the landscaping come in, and you want to see good landscaping, especially along 3A was the one that was frequently referenced, making sure that 3A stays a nice green throughway and maintains that rural and agricultural character, but also that you understand that any non-residential applicants are going to want to be seen. So trying to strike a balance that keeps the character that people are looking at for, but allows them that chance for
Flexibility,
success
yeah.
and flexibility. And then also some of the things is looking at, adjacent uses, what the neighbors are, and making sure that there's some landscaping or buffering provided, especially when you're up against a residential area, to create that nice separation. Okay. Number 4, parking. It says
That's fine.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you talk about commercial buildings, you're talking about any type of retail uses that doesn't make sense to make people drive around the back of the building.
But the side works.
I'm sorry?
But the side would work in that case, most likely.
Either the side or if they had vegetation in front of the parking area. You know, if they had bushes or trees where people could, I don't know. I mean, I think to a certain extent that for retail, this is good for industrial properties, you know, office, that type of thing. When you talk about retail, you know, people want to jump out of their cars, run to the store and get out, and want to drive around buildings.
Well, that's what the side door is for,
Yeah.
right next to the side parking lot, with the front facade facing the street, having no cars in front of it.
Maybe.
Because you don't want to put a vegetated buffer in front of the store, because nobody would see it.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know.
So you turn the store
I just think-
sideways.
I think it's just for retail thing, it becomes somewhat detrimental.
Not if the store's sideways.
Not if the store is
You
sideways.
put the store so the side of the store is facing the street, and the front is facing the parking lot.
Then you lose exposure. That's the biggest thing in the world to a commercial retail operation is exposure along the frontage of the road.
Right.
I mean, I'm saying you can do
You
that,
can
but I wouldn't do
But you can
that.
also do the frontage there, but have the door on the side.
Yeah.
Like Russ said. You could have your frontage with your show windows and stuff, with direct entrances on the side.
I think it's probably something we could debate for a while.
Well, hold on. Where'd they go? In anticipation, I went through the site plan regs, and I pulled up all of your existing, you have posted up there a cheat sheet of what you have in your existing site plan regs. Anticipated questions. And understanding that a lot of the ordinances predate all of us. And that we all need cheat sheets. Parking is in here somewhere. Parking required to be located to the rear or side of principal structures, cannot be located within 50 feet of any right of way or side or rear setbacks. Landscaping required for parking areas, minimum parking spaces based on use. So those types of provisions are already in your site plan review regulations.
I stand corrected.
No, that's fine. But you bring up a good point, though, in that you're gonna have a lot of, case-by-case variation. If it's in zoning, they have to get a variance to do something different. If it's just in your site plan review regs, then you have the opportunity to waive it if they can make their case. So perhaps parking doesn't go in zoning.
So if it doesn't go in zoning, where does it go?
It's already in site plan review regs,
So it stays in site plan
so it
review.
stays there. So for any of these, to the degree that it's redundant with site plan, I mean, that's another thing to think about.
Right.
So you want to keep it to the things that are pretty hard and fast.
We can leave it in site plan.
And put it in zoning or not? No? No? 1, 2, 3 no's?
I just don't know, I mean, what's the benefit versus not doing it versus doing it? I mean,
Honestly, I think it's redundant, and I think it makes it more restrictive having it in zoning. Less flexibility to deal with it on a case-by-case basis.
Which is what we're here for. makes sense to keep it in site plan and not
Mhm.
enshrine it in
I think
zoning.
it's different if it's on 102 versus 3A.
Yeah.
On 102, I mean, everything else around it
Yeah.
has parking in front of it, so why not?
Right.
Well, also 3A. I mean, look at Wilson's Farm, McQuestion's Farm, Haley's
That's a farm.
Pizza.
That's not like, but look at the convenience store and Haley's Pizza. I mean, there's no way you could do parking on the side or back.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
That's been there for God
forever.
knows how long.
All right.
See, Romano's is on the side.
Right.
But that's newer.
Yeah.
That's probably after this was in there. But it's doable. I mean, you see Romano's when you drive by.
Yeah.
But I would say in 102, I mean, it would be, with the size parcels we have, it would be very difficult to probably park on the side. If you own a commercial business, do you want to look like no one's shopping there? If you park behind it, like we have no customers. I mean,
Let's see, like Haley's is a strip mall, which is an entirely different animal.
yeah, but
It's
this
kinda-
would,
you
this would
could-
apply to that though.
I mean, it's impossible to do parking on the side when you have a strip mall.
Yeah. But this would apply to strip malls, right? This applies to
Mhm.
everything. So I'd say keep it in a site plan, not in
Yeah.
zoning.
I would, because then you can go do it on a site by site.
I don't know, I'm not sure if the reason this was put in here was more so to maintain character
Mm-hmm.
versus parking in general,
Mm-hmm.
but I may disagree about that, but, I mean, if you guys wanna go type one, that's fine.
But the character is also where it is. The character on 102 is very different than the character on 3A. Wilson's is very different than what's on 102.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Litchfield. You know,
Yeah.
which gets
the-
different
I know what
traffic,
you're
a different
talking
kind of
about.
volume. It's a lot more asphalt around there.
Yeah, right.
What's that,
So-
that ice cream store there that we did? Little ice cream store right along there, we just approved a few months ago. that the
Liquor.
guy
It
put
says
ice
parking
cream-
front.
Yeah,
DLB
Lick's
Paving's
or whatever
place.
like that. I mean, can you imagine
Oh.
making people drive around, I mean, even if they have the room, driving around the back and walking, I don't know.
Well, that's another question too. It's an existing structure with a new purpose. So is it grandfathered to old laws because it was built 50, 60, 70 years ago? Or it went from a farm stand to an ice cream parlor, does it automatically have to fall under new regulations?
So it'd be whether you'd call it a change of use. So to go from a farm stand to an ice cream parlor. So that is, again, it comes back to your town council. Some council believes that if you went from Starbucks to Dunkin' Donuts, it's a change of use. They're both coffee shops. They're both retail, but it's a change.
In the case of the ice cream parlor where they're a small business trying to start in what was an empty spot, you think you'd encourage them by allowing parking in the front so you see customers actually eating there? As opposed to saying you have to go in the back entrance.
That was like a
Uh,
turnkey thing, though. The new ice cream parlor.
Yeah, but you think that we
Already
should,
somebody,
yeah,
there
we
was
should
already
allow
one in
parking.
there, so they virtually just went in and turnkey. And
But that is a different use. But I guess in that case, I think it's stupid not to allow parking in front of the building because
Yeah.
that's how they survive.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to encourage business in town. And it's obviously not it's a good business to have.
Yeah, so that way, leaving it where it is now and taking it out of here, we can do just that. Everything comes in and
Yep.
whatever suits that particular business.
And what's around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because that's had parking in front of there forever.
Yes, that's a good point and a good distinction though to make. So, if it's only in site plan, the only time you'd see it and the only time they'd be required to adhere to that requirement would be if they were coming in with something that was required to file a site plan review application.
Right.
Whereas somebody who goes to Kevin for a building permit is still required to meet all zoning requirements as a condition of that building permit. So if it's in the zoning, they'd have to comply with it for Kevin to be able to give them their building permit.
So right now, it's not referenced in zoning at all.
Right. Your parking
It's
piece
done
is
that
not.
way for a reason. It's probably done that way for a reason, so why change it?
All right. All right, moving on. Architectural character. So this is another one that you may want to leave as site plan as opposed to have here. And this is one of the ones I know at the last meeting we talked about the squishier things not being in zoning. This is definitely one of the ones that's squishier. It's
Subjective.
a bit more subjective. And you do have quite a bit in your existing site plan review regulations. So,
Some of this looks very familiar.
yes. Some of it is from nearby towns, for some examples. So there's one line in here that I pulled in because it made me chuckle. That was item B. And that was, again, getting at some of the comments we've heard in terms of character and what types of development folks would like to see. Said, hey, somebody else has done it. Why not? And that was the franchise or corporate style architecture and or highly contrasting color schemes are strongly discouraged. That's not in your site plan review regulations. But it's something, site plan review regulations are easy enough to amend if that was something you wanted to move over there.
Again, strongly discouraged. You could strongly discourage whatever you want, but I mean, you still can't.
Sometimes it's difficult to fight the corporate machine. When they come in and you've got, I'll use an example that me in my volunteer role, I serve on the design review committee for the city of Concord. So the design review committee in Concord is a subcommittee of the planning board. Our decisions are advisory to the planning board, but it's, folks that have planning and design experience. And we had a franchise chain restaurant come in, and the design was so horribly garish that we looked at it and went, oh my goodness, no. And so we had to negotiate though with them because it was part of they're pretty much so just handed, here is your design. If you're opening a franchise, you have to look like this, bottom line. And they had little, apparently Concord wasn't the only city to push back on them because apparently they changed their franchise design to something a little bit more palatable. But we were able to say, no, you may not put a ginormous checkerboard on your building. Ginormous checkerboard. So you can push back on some of those design features, but you can't deny them because it's ugly. And so that's kind of where that's where the strongly discouraged comes in. So
I'd say put it in the site plan review and
Yeah.
my personal opinion, take it out of here.
Yeah.
okay, I think I think you have in site plan review.
Add
Not in those exact words, but in general meaning. C, I don't think you have something similar. C is getting at multiple buildings and making sure that the design as a whole is cohesive if you have multiple buildings. And that would be simple enough to add to site
That's
plan.
something that add a later date to the
Yeah.
design review.
Okay.
We say accessory buildings should be designed to complement the primary building. Is that assuming all of them are new buildings, or is that saying that you should meld into your neighborhood when you're being built with buildings around you?
So in this particular instance, it'd be on that particular site, for C here. So this is talking about all your new buildings. So if you're coming in with an application that has 2 or more buildings on it, make them look like they belong together.
So A is more the neighborhood.
A is more the neighborhood. Yep.
See, it's more like if your McDonald's restaurant has a standalone walk-in freezer for storing cold stuff, it should look more like the main
Primary
structure.
structure as opposed
Yeah.
to a standing walk-in freezer for cold stuff.
And traffic flow throughout that property should allow for, like the drive-through can go between the two.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so bottom line, architectural character, not in zoning. leave it in site plan and just take these two things that are,
To this.
that don't already exist in site plan, and we'll draft something to go there.
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me, lighting standards. This is not something we discussed at the last meeting, which is something that, in kind of thinking through this, since the last meeting, I wanted to throw out there, and just see if it was something that you wanted to include.
Is it in our site plan review now? Do we mention it at all?
I think we do. This looks familiar.
Yeah.
There was a big push for dark skies at one point.
I would have to dig further. It was not something that was specifically in, the general standards for site plan.
So does that belong more in zoning because it is black and white? I mean, offering. Do most towns have it in zoning versus site plan? Because I mean, either light blinks or a dozen, or either
Right,
oscillates or a dozen, or
right. Exactly, those are pure yes or no's. Bottom line is it's saying your lights can't trespass on your neighbor's property. And no lights that will cause seizures.
always good.
Details, right?
Yeah, some of that lighting would only come into signboards though, portable signboards, like the blinking lights and flashing lights, stuff like that would primarily be on that
Do you
type,
have
and
any
that's
of those?
covered under the sign ordinance.
There you go. Yep.
So just to put it there too, just to cover yourself, is it complete, is it exact the same, or you could have lights on your building, that's not a sign.
Right.
You have a flashing yellow light, come shop here, or, well, that's a sign, I guess. To me, a sign, I think of a business sign on the road, I don't think of lights on a building.
Yeah.
In that case, put in both spaces just to cover us.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd rather have it in there than not have it in there.
Okay. Easy enough. Screening of unsightly features, which is something we did talk about at the last meeting. We were predominantly talking about dumpsters and mechanical equipment. So A deals with your dumpsters and any of those other storage, et cetera, type, features you might have and what the expectations are for how to screen that. B also talks about loading docks. And basically, you don't want your front door to be a loading dock. You want folks to see your front door as your front door and make the loading dock be out of sight or to the back. Only the truck driver needs to know where the loading dock is. Still has to be accessible. Plantings, just what that expectation is for how to screen. And then the mechanical equipment piece for D. Some of this might be more detailed than you want to get in zoning. Some of this you may want to move.
Yeah, calling out the spacing of shrubberies and
Yeah.
the heights and such. Getting that detailed, I don't know if we want to do that in zoning. We want to encourage good landscape practice, but do we want to spell out what good landscape practice looks like to us?
Yeah, and I mean, in this, it's saying what you think is the minimum needed to hide things. So you get, those are the two sides.
I think for height and stuff like that, isn't that a zoning thing? Aren't height requirements usually more zoning than They're not.
Your structural height requirements are.
Yeah, but isn't
Screening.
isn't this kind of a structure though, that you're screening them on site features, so it's technically part of the structure? So will the enforcement of heights of that go into zoning because it falls in line with the building?
You have to talk about a tree, not a structure. Like if
Yeah,
a
but it's-
fence would, but a tree wouldn't.
But it's the same purpose though.
Same purpose, but.
So don't you want the
different
zoning to say how tall the tree should be?
Mm.
I don't know. Too nitpicky.
Yeah, and then, you know, your tree grows too much and then,
You have a hurricane, it falls down, then what happens?
I mean, you don't wanna be in the business of
Right.
saying your trees are too tall, go trim them. I don't know,
If you got power lines going by, you can't have the trees there anyway,
yeah.
so.
So you recommend a streamlined version of this in zoning, or just put it all on the site plan?
I might go with a streamlined version here, and then if there are details that you wanna add to site plan, add details to site plan.
Yeah, we certainly don't wanna let this go loose. We do wanna have something in here, but streamlined a little more than this.
A and B makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
and D makes sense. The planting is the only one that's a little fuzzy.
We can dump it.
We do want plantings, though.
Yeah, you'd want to encourage, I think.
Some
Is that
greenery.
covered somewhere else though?
Yeah, you already have your, you have your landscaping piece. But then you also have in your existing site plan. Where was it? There was something that I saw.
Those plantings basically come under the buffer anyway, Jen.
Yeah, some of them.
Well, this is for screening unsightly features. It's not part of the buffer.
Right, but if,
Right.
in most places, they would be near the lot lines.
would
You
hope.
do
Keep
have,
it under the buffer, so.
you do have some of the language in your site plan for how to do screening. You could probably be fine.
I think you just leave C
Yeah.
in the site plan. Because it's something that's gonna be changed in every site you look at. Where it is on the site and everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's still covered, it's just covered somewhere
It's
else.
still covered.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking at like streamlining and just editing down to be a little bit more concise, A, B, and D for zoning. And then C, look at how that might fit within site plan. Does that sound? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So that was the really tough part here.
Deciding where to put the shrubs?
No, they're going through pages 3 and 4 out of this giant packet. That was the
35 pages, that was the worst.
worst. Yeah, that was the newest, squishiest piece of it all. The rest is mostly existing language. If we flip to page 5. There's just a new paragraph that I added under performance standards. And actually, let's not look at page 5. Let's instead to do the similar version of this, because you guys said you liked the put it all in 400 section. Let's look at page 10. Because this would be the other way of approaching it. If you look at page 10, section 700.03. Now keep in mind the .03 section is identical for all 6 districts here. So performance standards, I've broken it out to be right now, A is what you already have for all 6. B, this is new, and this is again just reiterating the expectation that things should blend in with character, scale, and design of existing developed properties. And then C says, and you also have to meet the requirements of this new section 408 that we just reviewed.
You see, that does say submit building elevations and landscaping plans to the planning board.
Which are already required under site plan. So. Sound good? Okay. All right, going backwards. Back to page 5. For the highway commercial district, we deleted motorized vehicles from item B, permitted uses. Or that was the direction given at the last meeting. I added in antiques. What about antique shops? I mean, if you're being specific about the types of shops, if you're thinking about your little cottage type shop, so I thought, throw it out, see what you guys thought. It's just something that jumped out as,
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
okay. Moving forward. Page 6. So this is the highway commercial district that we're looking at, section 102, this is 102. So when we looked at the permitted uses, you guys said, only keep hotels and motels along 102 as a permitted use, but add bed and breakfasts to, the 3 commercial districts. So for 102, what I heard at the last meeting was hotel, motel, and bed and breakfast.
Yep.
Okay, so that's H. Q, agricultural uses. And this is the one, if you want, we can do it once and cover all 6. Or we can repeat the question for each of the 6. Main question is, as I mentioned, what we did is to be consistent with the agricultural overlay, permitted uses, copied that list of A through H, it becomes 1 through 7. The question is the processing plants. Which districts would you recommend allowing that?
You mean like slaughterhouses?
No, we said no slaughterhouses.
Oh, we said, no, that's what I thought we said.
It would be 3A.
Okay. North and south, or just south?
Well, they're all in
or-
the middle there already. All the farms in the middle do processing.
Okay,
So, I mean,
they do.
don't they have stores, they sell stuff, and do they make pies?
They make pies and bread.
Yeah, they do.
They just
Baked
package.
goods?
Wilson does.
Yeah.
They make fresh bread.
Yeah, but I mean, could they put up like a
Brownies.
large-scale processing plant? I know they do small stuff like Wilson's, but suppose they wanted to take and they wanted to put a small processing plant right on site to say, do all the canning of different types of vegetables or flash freeze stuff in order to, distribute across. Is that something that we're looking for to allow? I mean, it's a question.
Exactly, that's the question.
I don't think it's a bad idea.
And I think you should ask the Wilsons and the farm owners that too,
Okay,
because
that's the question.
we don't understand their full operation. To me, they package things, so it's a letter of the law if you don't allow packaging, even though it's packaging 100 pies, not 2,000 cans of corn, you're still packaging something. So I don't think it's fair to not allow it.
Well, putting strawberries in a basket to sell is packaging.
yeah.
So it is happening, so.
She's talking about processing, processing.
Yeah, and this is then tie it back to that definition that we looked at earlier. So this is your bigger. I would say it's more of a commercial use or a commercial slash industrial use. So it'd be something where as long as it were within a commercial transitional or commercial industrial district, fine. But do you want it next door, you know, a canning plant next door to somebody's house? Those are the kind of the pros and cons.
I guess we gotta find out what do they do now. Cause it,
Question.
well, not to like bag them, but not, what do they have plans for their businesses?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and, maybe this is something they will never use, or maybe it's something that they do already, or maybe it's something that they wanna do.
Yeah, because when you stop and think, if you're doing honey, that's processing, cider, whipped cream, it's all processing.
Definition. A facility used for the cooking, dehydrating, refining, bottling, canning, or other treatment of agricultural products which changes the naturally grown product for consumer use.
Cider and honey,
Egad.
you're bottling it
Alright,
for public use. It's a processing plant.
alright,
I think they should get a little bit more research on.
Yeah.
yep.
I don't know. I don't.
And maybe the way around it is you do the agricultural overlay, you allow this in an agricultural overlay district,
Regardless of whether you're,
where the underline is residential or not. Then you
Mhm.
can still do it. Cause all the farms are residential, right, pretty much? None of them are commercial,
except for the southern end.
which is no farm stands there, that's just growing fields, right? I don't think so.
Kim knows that detail.
Hmm?
Do they have farm stands? The southern end there?
That's just growing fields, right? That's
Just
not
fields?
in the
That's
commercial
just
zone.
fields, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so all the places where you would sell something are all residential.
What's Rhodanus, is that still residential? Yeah, I think it is.
So it basically applies to all the farms in town.
So maybe that's it, we just say that the processing is allowed in the overlay period.
Or the north and south commercial.
Or the commercial
Yeah,
districts.
why not allow them to do it if they want to?
Right. Okay. Okay. All right, so check mark 7 in the non-residential districts, we're letting the processing plant piece go. And saying, yes, you're allowed to. Okay, so the other thing, so when we, last meeting, when you, said to pull motorized vehicles out of B, said to allow them in 102, but what this is we pulled it from somewhere else. Where did it get deleted from?
701.
Huh?
701B. It was deleted, motorized vehicles.
We deleted it. There was, it was 701N. So that was taking, car dealerships off of 3A. And saying no car dealerships on 3A, but they could go on 102. So that was switching from the southwestern commercial district to the 102 district for that use.
But if the garage on 3A across from St. Francis wants to sell a car or two because he's a garage and maybe sells cars that he fixes, is he precluded from selling a car now? Because it's an existing business. Unless you put retail establishments, the primary use of sale of motor vehicles. So a service garage with a secondary use of selling a couple cars here and there would be allowed to. Or I guess he'd be grandfathered anyway because it's an existing business.
Yes.
But I think you should still define it.
So, all right, so what I just made a little kind of wordsmith edit was retail establishments primarily for the sale of motor vehicles.
Yeah.
So when we get to the other district, we need to just make sure that
Matches.
the garage is allowed to continue. Okay. Next piece is frontage. This is copied verbatim through all 6. This is the one section that people, in terms of the outreach, this is the one thing that folks said doesn't work.
Now, the 400 feet between access points, that's a state thing, right? Does DOT? Is that what we figured out?
No. Yes and no. So there's another one of the little handy dandy info sheets on what the requirements are for a DOT driveway permit. There's only a handful of things that are hard and fast. The one hard and fast dimensional piece is you have to have 400 feet of all season safe sight distance. After that, it gets to
Gets better.
a quote that I pulled from a PowerPoint presentation was, bottom line, is it reasonable? So they've got all these different policy statements. There's 30 plus pages of policy statements that get to what's reasonable. And it comes down to, is it safe? And so they've got a lot of if-thens and then maybe this and then maybe that. But it's a site-by-site basis. And so they look at the evaluation of traffic impacts. And then there's the whole question of, do you need a traffic study? And so they've got thresholds for when you do need an impact study and when you don't need an impact study. And so then what are the things that they look at on a case-by-case basis? Having had to go through the administrative rules process, I was absolutely flabbergasted that those passed as administrative rules.
So are we good with 400 feet in your mind?
So, yeah,
Just because of the chase.
yeah.
Any less would be a safety issue between cars coming out unless you have the common driveways. And there's not that much land anyway in 102.
And if they've got less, then they can ask for a variance. One of the things that I pulled in was the fourth line here on the table. Sorry, no. The third line on the table, which is existing language. You had a grandfather provision in all of your districts for lots created before March 14, 1989, with frontage on 3A, and they had a lesser requirement. And that was essentially a grandfathering and making sure that those lots did not become non-compliant when it went to a wider frontage requirement. And so you'd want to continue that forward.
Now, 200 feet, I know when I first started, the gentleman here was saying why businesses don't feel Litchfield's a friendly place to come to, and he mentioned the frontage. I forget his name that was here. He's in the audience.
That's
Uh,
Gucci?
No.
No.
Is 200 feet, I know we looked at the lot sizes, is that, I mean, anything smaller would be too crowded?
Right, so again, I think what I heard from you all at the last meeting was this was a compromise.
Yep.
And that looking to create something that was more permissive, and reduce the requirement, but also still,
Character.
maintain character. So, and again, we can run this back past the businesses that were willing to share their thoughts and comments to get their input and see if this would help meet some of their concerns.
Okay.
So again, that's something that runs common between all of them, so that eliminates something that we'd have to review throughout. 602.06, This is just a language tweak. So the one thing that you guys mentioned at the last meeting was trying to be more consistent with the language in the Aquifer Protection District, just to minimize any confusion or ambiguity of how everything ties together. So we just said site coverage, comma, maximum impervious surface. And then clarified that it's, a maximum of 65%, which stays the same, of the gross area of the site shall be comprised of impervious surfaces or occupied by building structures, parking areas, driveways, etc., which are essentially synonymous. Okay, so then the next bit at the bottom of page 7, we can ignore because,
I have a question.
Yes.
Just, it's a little bit confusing to me. In 602.04, we have a maximum building height permitted of 56 feet, which is roughly 5 stories, right? Give or take, each story is 10 feet. How do you allow something like that and then ask them to maintain the character of, that just jumped out at me there. So just offer that up, guys.
Yeah, how long has that been in there?
56 feet is a lot of building, boy.
Yeah.
Is the 56 feet including the chimneys, church spires? And is there a lesser amount for the usable day-to-day space, but that's just the height for the top of a steeple or the top of a...
That doesn't include your towers, church spires.
No,
Right.
that's
You know,
residential.
at the top, like 56 feet, that's pretty high. Yeah. It's,
We don't have equipment.
We don't have any
that high.
5-story buildings in
no,
town.
no.
That was 30 some odd feet, wasn't it, Kevin?
What's that?
Wasn't that 30 some odd feet?
What?
36 foot,
For what?
the building height maximum that we looked at?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't touch it.
There's no red on it.
56. And it's roughly, 10 to 12 feet per story, so
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at the 5-story building right there, right?
Although I think some commercial, you might get closer, you might get 15 to 20. I know it seems extreme. It's a
Between the
lot.
floors?
But it's still 56
Yeah, but
feet. though.
even still,
It's
if
not
you
gonna
go
have
20, it's still almost a 3-story building, right? That just seems really high.
I mean, I'm guessing for a building that high, it has to be a pretty big building, which would then take into account the number of people that are in the building and sewage requirements and stuff like that. So maybe
Like a super Walmart.
it's kind of like a moot point, but should we even have that in here, that 56 feet as a
Hold on.
maximum allowable building
I'm gonna
height?
go to my cheat sheet from last meeting.
Would the fire chief approve of a building 56 feet tall?
I don't think so.
No, you don't.
I mean, there are some big houses, basically, we use an example like Westview.
Yeah.
House on Westview where they had a chimney fire and we threw a 32-foot ladder and we couldn't get to the top of it. We missed by 10 feet.
Yeah.
So you're talking 42 feet from ground level to the top.
Yep.
So we had to have a ladder truck come in and do it, but there are some houses like that, but there's not many, but on the commercial end of it, I don't see.
Yep.
Well, what's the,
Although I don't know how tall Mel's is. That's a pretty big building over there.
what's
Oh,
the,
the
what's the
arcade
old
is-
town hall? What's the height of that next door?
Oh, that's probably only 30 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's what,
It's
two
a
and a half
3-story
stories?
structure, right?
Huh?
Mel's the arcade.
Yeah, there's 3
It's
floors in
arcade.
that.
It's 3. The top was living, and then
The
the
two,
first and second and
second
third are
and third
living.
floor, second floor is living, second and third are actually living.
That might be 56 feet. That's
Yeah.
pretty tall from the bottom
That's
to
pretty
that.
tall, yeah.
Which was that?
Mel's.
Mel's? Okay. So here's the comparison, the side by side. Your section 600 highway commercial district, 56 feet. Your southwestern commercial exists at 56 feet. Your northern commercial is 35 feet. Your transitional district is 35 feet. Your northern commercial industrial is 56, and your southern commercial industrial is 56.
Wow. For it to have been a typo, it's a well-propagated typo.
Unless they're looking at the extreme ends for ladder coverage from Hudson and Manchester.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I can see, because
Beyond fire, it's the aesthetic value of it. Aesthetically, how does a 56-foot building look next to one that's 20 feet?
not too good.
So, safety is important, but outside of that, you're looking at. But again, with the clause of the look and feel, character of the neighborhood, adjoining buildings, would
Yeah.
that stop it?
And again, going back to the site plan cheat sheet. Buried it in my files. Print everything out on paper so I can like flip back and forth between things quicker than on the computer, but I'm burying my stuff. There is a piece on roof lines. Doesn't say, oh, heights to be consistent with adjacent structures and comply with zoning. That's part of your site plan. So if you had something where the neighbors were little single-story structures and they came in with the 56, under site plan, you could say, yeah.
I think that 56 should be looked at. It doesn't sound right for some reason.
We can do some research.
Just looking at the clock, it's,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. Can we do a couple really quick? All right, so you are okay with the impervious language there? You can skip all the rest on that section. Just trying to think really, really fast if I flip super fast through. The rest is consistent throughout, and I believe we addressed all of those things that would be carried through. So the only thing I would say is if you flip towards the end, skip all the rest of the non-residential to page 31. And actually not even page 31, because that's only kept for reference. Page 32. If we're working on cleaning up and tying together impervious surface language, and if you're looking to slightly increase the amount of impervious surface that's allowed under your Aquifer Protection District's conditional use permit provision, I would recommend a slightly better definition of impervious surface.
Are you familiar with LEED?
Yes.
Do they have a definition for impervious surface?
Probably the one I gave you here in the sample is it's a pretty simple, it's a common definition that most of your applicants will be familiar with.
I like it. It's logical.
Yes.
Oh.
I can tell you when I was on the phone with the engineer for one of your past applicants and we were looking at the definition of impervious surface, they laughed at it. Because it deducts a lot of things that really are impervious. So, one of them is impervious surfaces include concrete unless unsealed cracks or holes are present.
I think we should go with the standard engineering definition.
You know, so it's,
Instead of trying to wordsmith ourselves.
yeah, and it was more that my concern with the way the definition was structured, it lets things go through that really are impervious, and it lets your applicant not count them. which means that in the end, they could really come out with something that, on a true definition of what is impervious, they could come out with something that's significantly more impervious than what's permitted. Because of some technicalities in the way that the definition is structured. So the new definition makes it a tighter, stricter definition. That would- All right.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
It's fine with me.
So then, the things that you guys had asked me to just clean up was under, so the big issue, or the thing that we figured was a stopping point for folks was when they looked through the list of prohibited uses, they saw anything more than 15% is prohibited. It's a prohibited use. And it kept people from reading further to find out that there was a conditional use permit that they could request to exceed the 15. So simply saying that the covering of more than 15% of the lot, unless a conditional use permit is granted under section 1255 below. The other thing is that the prohibited only called out residential and commercial industrial, but there was the commercial district and the transitional districts were not addressed. But considered to be part of commercial industrial, which is kind of more of a clean it up and get rid of the ambiguity. It was interpreted as all of the districts, but not literally specified as all of the districts. So that's just a technical cleanup, if it looks okay. And then 1255, again, just cleaned up and simplified how, what the conditional use additional coverage would be allowed. So again, clarifying where commercial and transitional fell in under that, and then also, you guys had said to not go with the 60, but to go with to match the underlying districts, and so that's what I did. Yeah.
You made note about 25% choose to use a more stringent definition of impervious surface.
Yes, so that's another, that was just something, my guilt for proposing a more stringent definition of impervious. For non-residential, you might want to set the baseline at higher than 15% and say 25. It's still a fairly low threshold, but again, it's doing a little bit of a give and a take. I put it in the margins as food for thought.
And what's the harm of doing that? It's just more pavement, right?
More pavement, more building. The trade-off is that non-residential development is more intensive in terms of the amount of land it requires to be feasible than a residential.
You need more space for parking and stuff like that.
Exactly. A house, you're gonna have a smaller footprint, you're gonna have, space to park 2 cars. So you end up with walkways and additional parking and a larger footprint for a non-residential structure. So purely to be feasible, you need a little bit more space.
I don't have a problem with 25.
25% sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, the trade-off is, again, from that, from the good watershed management perspective, the whole point of having an impervious surface threshold is when you average out development over a watershed, there's folks that have gone through the calculation, the scientific calculations of the impacts of development on your water quality, and 10% impervious as an average across the entire watershed is the tipping point from when you start to see adverse impacts to water quality. And so that's where that's why impervious surface requirements are set so low, is trying to keep your across the watershed average closer to that tipping point, so you're not drinking dirty contaminated water, or minimizing the contaminants that you have to clean out of your water supply. And for communities that are highly dependent on well, it's not getting cleaned out unless you have a filtration system. Your other educational tidbit of the night. Sorry. So I went off on the educational piece. How did folks feel about the 25 for non-residential? I see 2 yeses, 3 yeses.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So you need to change 1255 from 15 to 25?
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's it. Those are all the changes that I had drafted.
Do your timesheet.
Do your timesheet.
It'll be 6 hours on agricultural, 10 hours on.
About right.
An hour and a half each.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that much?
Well, minus
Close.
4 minutes.
May as well, right?
Hey, 4 minutes is pretty close to a tenth of an hour if you round it up.
I don't do tests anymore.
Now we go to October.
That's right, it's a new month.
So where do you find October?
It's in the middle.
Oh.
Computer doesn't know how to count.
Oh, it's my stupid iPad.
How are we doing as far as time and money in this thing for the, we're good?
I can check with Donna where you're at for match, but knowing what we had estimated, I think we had estimated 2 hours per month of planning
2
board
hours
time.
per month.
Yeah, we estimated really conservatively in the grant application. My own personal budgeting paranoia is overcommitting match. So my personal, you always estimate low when you're estimating match, because it's better that you exceed it than not meet it. So I think we were all set going in. And in terms of work progress and grant drawdowns, we're pretty much so on target and good.
Good. Do we want to speak briefly about the community survey?
We need more input.
We need more input.
So anything that you guys have that you can do to send it out and share it with folks on your own kind of efforts and initiative, that'd be fantastic.
Did we-
Is that, you are sending it to the senior communities?
Yeah, senior communities are covered.
Okay, 'cause that's why I was looking for the contacts.
That's what I thought you were looking for.
Good.
Pine Creek's already has it, and the other ones will have it this week.
Can you share with the board what you sent out to the senior community so that they might be able to replicate that for any other contact lists that they have, or something similar?
I sent you a link out and asked them just to,
Yeah, just so that they can go copy, paste.
Yeah.
For
I
their
just-
own,
just take the email that Jen gave you, and copy that in, right into your message, the link for the site.
yeah, I don't think that went out to everybody. It was
Ah.
just you guys.
I can, well, why don't you send it out to the board, Joan?
Okay,
And you
I
you
can-
can just put that right into your message and send it out to the people you want to contact. And all they have to do is click on it and it'll go, take them right to it. Be interesting to see how many more we have from
Mhm.
the other day.
Yeah.
Make sure they are coming up.
Just as another kind of other businessy note on it, I've been trying, Joan sends out the link for the Google site usually on Friday before the meeting, and I've been trying also on Friday to post all of the, work products, so that they're there for the weekend. So the ag piece and the commercial piece were all up there, on Friday, and same with the meeting before, I had all the major work products up on Friday.
I can't get into that unless I'm here. I can't get into that link from home.
to the site,
Yeah, it keeps coming back and saying it's protected or something. I
but you
mean, I
can get it
gave
in
up.
here?
I haven't tried it for a few months, but,
Hmm.
I mean, when I'm here, it works fine. But I can't
Did
do
you-
it from home.
When you go into Google, try it from here, on sites.
Okay,
And it'll list all the different meetings,
all right,
and it's reverse order.
okay. I didn't try that. I was
Yeah,
just trying to get
try
it
going in
email.
from there, and
Okay.
you should be able to open that. It's a little easier.
Because do you have the list of sites? That's what you're saying, you have the list of all the sites? that I put up?
I was
Yeah,
trying,
well, on the Google, there is a site listing.
Okay.
It has all the planning board meetings listed. I can go back to any past meeting.
Right.
Another thing, just so people are aware, the legal session last week was on planning and fair housing review, and Donna did send that out to everyone as a link. So I think you'll find some of it interesting, some we've been through before. Just something to keep in mind. We'll be going through it again at some point.
Let's see, moving through the agenda, release escrow funds?
Yeah, can we do that for John Nelson? It was approved in July, all the bills are in. Yeah, it started with $2,500. There's about 2,000 left, but you can just say the
Release the balance of
yeah.
funds.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we release the escrow funds for John Nelson subdivision tax map 18 lot 64 approved on July 9th, 2013.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries 6-0-0.
Thank you.
And I think it would be wise to defer approving the meeting minutes until our next meeting,
Yes.
unless anybody wants to stay and continue that.
Have fun.
Any other business?
You have 32 survey responses.
So we doubled it.
You doubled it.
Still a good start. And you've mentioned the Planning and Fair Housing Law lecture series. If there's no other business, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion and multiple seconds. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries 6-0-0. Meeting is now adjourned. Our next meeting will be in 2 weeks. I don't have the date in front of me, but trust me, it will be.
15.
15th, thank you. Thank you very much and have a good evening.